Whenever we talk about inclusionary housing, someone inevitably asks about whether these requirements will lead to increases in the market rate housing prices. When we require developers to make some units available at affordable prices, won't they just pass that cost on to the other home buyers? In order to think about this, let's first step back and think a little bit about how house prices are set in the market in general. There are basically three parts to the cost of any new house: the land, the cost of building the house, including the legal fees, permits, everything else, and then the developer's profit. But the builder doesn't really have control over the price. The market sets the price. Because buyers can choose from other similar housing, the builders of new homes are basically stuck with the market price. When the market rises, builders don't sell for the same price that they had in mind when they started a project. The market goes up, they charge the new market price, and they earn an extra profit. But over time, builder profits are going to tend to return to normal because the land prices will rise to capture these higher prices. If you think about it, if builders can earn extra profits, then landowners are going to have a lot of builders competing for their land, and they're going to be able to sell to one who's willing to settle for more normal profits at a higher price. And when the market falls, the same thing happens in reverse. In the short term, developer profits suffer. In the long term, land prices drop. Land prices drop because developers are not willing to do projects that don't earn them normal profits. So how does inclusionary housing impact this process? When a city imposes inclusionary housing requirements, it may increase the developer's cost. If they have to sell some units below cost, then they'll need to make up that difference from the market rate units. Incentives like density bonus or fee waivers or other things might partially offset that increase, but usually there's some additional cost. So it makes sense that people would ask whether IZ would result in increased home prices for the market rate units. Don't the developers have to pass those costs on to the other buyers? But remember that the market sets the prices, so developers can't really pass those costs on to the other home buyers. Sure, if you added this cost to every housing unit in the whole market, then prices would rise, but we're only impacting the cost for new units, and new units are only ever a very small percentage of the overall housing market. So the question is, do landowners have to accept these lower prices? Now, if the cost of inclusionary zoning were really high, it might push the land prices so low that some landowners would simply choose not to sell. And if enough landowners made this choice, then in the long run, less housing would get built, and this would ultimately result in higher prices in the long term. In the end, what economists fight over is at what point the extra cost of inclusionary zoning results in reductions in the supply of land for housing. It's clear that if the cost is relatively low, there'd be no impact on the long-term housing prices, and if the cost is very high, then there could be some impact. Fortunately, we have recent research that addresses this question. Researchers at the Furman Center for Real Estate at NYU studied inclusionary programs in the Boston area and in the San Francisco Bay Area. They found that in the towns around Boston, inclusionary zoning did decrease the rate of housing production relative to the non-inclusionary jurisdictions, and that this resulted in small increases in the market price of housing in those towns. But what was surprising was that the same data for the San Francisco Bay Area showed that inclusionary zoning programs had no impact on either production or prices. This suggests that it's at least possible to develop inclusionary programs that don't impact market prices. The difference between these two regions is that the Bay Area programs tended to offer developers a greater range of options for meeting their inclusionary obligations and more incentives to help them offset those additional costs. The Bay Area programs worked with the developers to make inclusionary zoning less of a burden. Unfortunately for local policymakers, this means that the devil's in the details. A well-designed, well-run program can create affordable units without increasing prices, but the risk of price increases is real, and it's something that every program needs to be careful about. Thank you.